The story of this Nazi criminal is still shocking today. Ilse Koch is unique in that her and her husband's feats astonished even the top leaders of the Third Reich. This is X-War history, and today we will tell you about horrific deeds and rightfully deserved end of Ilse Koch. Let's begin. The future torturer was born in Dresden, a sweet child who, as a child, even received the nickname Angel from the constant visitors to the library where little Ilse often spent her free time. The girl, growing up, dreamed of settling her own life, so she learned to be an accountant. However, this was not sufficient for the overall material well-being. Fortunately for Ilse, in 1934 she met Karl Koch, a member of the Nazi Party and SS men. The young people, feeling a mutual sympathy, stayed together, and Ilse, as a faithful companion, decided to accompany her lover wherever fate would send him. And fate in 1936 sent Karl Koch to the Sachsenhausen concentration camp as commandant. His life partner took a job there as an accountant 2 years later. At Sachsenhausen, Koch quickly gained the title of one of the worst sadists, beating prisoners with a whip with pieces of razor blades inserted in it, branding them, and loving to torture the unfortunates with a vice. Ilse, watching this, was not at all outraged. On the contrary, she greedily absorbed her new sensations. In 1937, Koch was spotted and transferred to Buchenwald, where he had to create a new concentration camp practically from scratch. Here too, Koch was joined by his dear partner. Many prisoners recall that Ilse Koch was feared far greater than her husband. She liked to take a stroll through the camp, picking out a random victim and beating him half to death with a lash. Soon, however, this sadist didn't seem happy about what she already did, so Ilse got herself a shepherd dog. The woman's main pastime there was to set the vicious dog on the prisoners, and especially on the pregnant prisoners. Koch loved to watch the terror of the prisoners and how the dog's fangs tear the bodies of the unfortunate victims. Not surprisingly, that Koch was soon nicknamed the Buchenwald Witch and the Buchenwald Bitch among the prisoners of Buchenwald. As she progressed, the inventiveness of the Buchenwald Witch just increased. She fell in love with a new pastime, picking out a few prisoners to be sent to the zoo to be devoured by the Himalayan bears that lived there. Ilse Koch herself naturally stood at the cage, enjoying the bloody scene. But the most dreadful and quite disturbing hobby that the Buchenwald Witch eventually found for herself was needlework. But not in the usual human sense as we know it, but rather perverted and bloody. Koch began to select from among the prisoners those who had tattoos on their bodies. Those selected were put to death by lethal injection. Then the skin was removed, processed, and given to Ilse Koch. All prisoners were aware of the sadist's passion for tattoos, so they deliberately cut themselves in order to ruin the tattoo, or even tried to get into the gas chamber to have the drawing permanently ruined. There is a well-known case of a French cabaret actress who had a very beautiful tattoo on her entire back and was sent to a concentration camp. As soon as Ilse Koch noticed the girl, her fate was determined. The Buchenwald Witch made herself a tablecloth out of the poor woman's skin. Koch's madness only gained traction. She began sewing gloves, handbags, even underwear from human skin. Thus, one of the prisoners, Albert Grunovsky, who worked in the morgue, said that Koch sewed her panties from the skin of a Roma. A prisoner saw a tattoo on the unfortunate man's body, which later turned out to be on her underwear. The tattoo that adorned Ilse's underwear I saw on the back of a Roma from my block. The prison doctor who wrote out death certificates for prisoners helped to falsify documents, indicating that the cause of death of tattoo holders was a heart attack. Ilse Koch got so caught up in her craft that she even began corresponding with the wives of commandants of other camps by sharing the secrets of fashioning and processing human skin. The sadist liked to make the lampshades above everything else, for which she soon earned the eponymous nickname Frau Lampshade. Strange as it may seem, but nothing human was alien to the Buchenwald Witch. For example, one day she spotted a tall and athletic young Czech among the prisoners. On her orders, the man was washed, fed heavily for several days, and then, having changed into a strict suit, was taken to Ilse's apartment. She met the prisoner in a pink dressing gown, hinting at a more intimate sequel. This sort of debauchery she arranged regularly. The Czech, however, refused and immediately signed his own death penalty. At first, he was brutally beaten by Koch, then the man was shot. By the light of a lampshade, Ilse Koch, unbelievably, wrote gentle and romantic poems. However, the madness of the Koch couple soon became known at the top. Karl Koch was accused of murdering an SS man who complained of being extorted by his superiors, also a doctor who had secretly treated Koch against syphilis. But the most surprising charges were embezzlement and excessive cruelty to prisoners. This is indeed a unique case in which executioners were accused of exceeding the limits of their authority as executioners. But if that could still somehow get away with it, the embezzlement of about 1 million marks was considered the worst crime. Despite all requests to be sent to the front and to be given the opportunity to redeem himself, Karl Koch was convicted and sentenced to death. The sentence was carried out in April of 1945. In fact, he was shot in the courtyard of the Buchenwald concentration camp. Ilse Koch managed to somehow get out of it, since no direct evidence of her guilt was found, and she managed to hide her tricks securely. After the release, Koch was no longer given her previous job, so she tried to keep a low profile as much as possible and not draw attention to herself. Ironically, her arrest and detention briefly earned Koch the status of anti-Nazi activist, a status she happily maintained until 1947, when charges were brought against her for the crimes she had committed at Buchenwald. Koch, however, assured that all the facts were in fact the conspiracy of co-workers, who retaliated against the unfortunate woman for her official eagerness. Despite her pregnancy, Koch was sentenced to life imprisonment. In 1951, though, the High Commissioner dismissed all charges against Ilse Koch, stating that the evidence gathered was insufficient and that all that had been presented to the court was no more than non-essential evidence that she ordered the execution of someone, and there is no evidence of her involvement in the manufacture of tattooed skin crafts. After such an openly bizarre decision, already the Germans were on the rampage and could not believe that one of the most brutal women of the Third Reich had gained her freedom like that. Even the American prosecutor, William Denson, who had sentenced Koch to life imprisonment, was stunned. This is a monstrous failure of justice. Ilse Koch was one of the most extreme sadists among the Nazi criminals. It is simply impossible to count the number of people willing to testify against her, not only because she was the wife of the camp commandant, but also because she was a creature damned by God. For the sake of justice, Ilse Koch was almost immediately arrested by German authorities when she was released from an American prison in Munich, and a new trial was launched. The Bavarian Ministry of Justice began to actively search for witnesses in order to gather indisputable evidence. As a result, 240 surviving prisoners of the concentration camps Sachsenhausen and Buchenwald were summoned for a new trial. Based on the evidence gathered, Ilse Koch was resentenced to life imprisonment. The sadist herself never acknowledged her guilt, and even in letters to her son she adamantly denied any guilt, stating that she was only sincerely and honestly fulfilling her duty to her country. Koch's son was the only person who visited the prisoner in prison. During his last visit, the Buchenwald witch complained of injustice and that she had not been sleeping well. The souls of the dead concentration camp prisoners visited her at night. Unable, perhaps, to withstand the constant scary visions, on September 1st, 1967, Ilse Koch ate for the last time, wrote her son a farewell letter, and hanged herself in her cell on bound sheets. The son later took his mother's maiden name, Keller, and in 1971 even tried to restore his mother's good name by writing a heartfelt letter to the editorial board of the New York Times. However, the letter went without an answer. Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to X War History for more videos and leave a like.